When episode 2 first premiered, Gummigoo Mania took our collective social timelines by storm, and back then it was easy to see why. He had a sweet personality, a charming Australian accent, and depending on who you asked, he was pretty damn sexy. And trust, you could ask me. Mostly though, he was peak mascot design, and everyone found him very cute. Most importantly though, his tragic tale of gaining sapience, ending in one of the most shocking animated deaths in history, he was destined to make a lasting impact on viewers, spawning a shit ton of fan art and discussion. And this was the perfect storm to create one of the most marketable Scrimlows in history. Naturally, Glitch took full advantage, instantly giving the fella a bunch of merch. Recently, even being added as back bling in Fortnite, and for Gummigoo that was a death knell, because people would start to resent a stupid NPC Candy hogging all the merch from their faves, namely Zooble and Gangle. Ragatha didn't even make the damn Fortnite trailer, and I think that's a fairly reasonable reaction. While I love Gummigoo myself, if I didn't, I'd be pissed. So I'd never villainize anyone complaining because they have every right to. What is extremely disheartening, however, is how opinions on the external treatment of Gummigoo have leaked into opinions about his role in the show, especially in relation to Pomni. As episode 8 would make very clear, people were extremely confused about and mocked the idea of Gummigoo going feral on Pomni being her worst nightmare. And while it may not be as deep a cut as the rest of the gangs, it made way more sense than people were making out. And now with the final episode having premiered, I think it's safe to say that Gummigoo has been completely vindicated, and his story might be the most important to understand the show's message. No, I'm not kidding. The spoilers, obviously. The first common take I need to dispute here is that NPCs aren't people, and that being an AI totally invalidates his importance. Because while it's true in real life that AI is just a bunch of bullshit, it's clear AI in this world is actual artificial intelligence, at least ones that are 57 times more immersive, functionally not even being that different from a real human, and making clear the NPCs have real thoughts and feelings despite having their lives programmed in for them is like the whole point of Candy Carrier Chaos. So as soon as Gummigoo falls out of bounds, he sees the models for every character in the kingdom and immediately understands something's up. He stares into his own and already has an existential crisis, clearly comprehending that either this guy is an imposter or there's something bigger going on. Then of course Pomni enters the scene, whom he demands answers from, seeing as her and the rest of her crew don't have models. And the exchange is made all the more chilling when he realizes he can't even remember the face of his own mother, because she was simply never programmed into the kingdom. Now, I feel as if it's extremely easy to empathize for the guy here. We may not have known him long, but the situation is digestible enough that you don't really need to. He's just been made aware of the fact his entire existence is a lie, and even if he hasn't been sapient or even existed for that long, that doesn't make the situation any easier to grapple with. I mean, he's been programmed to believe he has. And at this point, claiming he's a fake person and therefore doesn't count is already pretty hard, because he's having real emotions over an experience only things that are alive can have, wondering who he really is and what's his purpose. And while his mother may not have ever been real, finding out she's fake is essentially the equivalent of finding out she's dead, and he's clearly experiencing something similar to grief. And when he processes all of this, he just gives up, believing everything and everyone to be pointless. Pomni informs him that feeling nothing is actually a human experience as well, and she's completely right. If you're not religious, or at the very least don't believe in a higher purpose, and I personally don't, life can seem meaningless. And really, not to get too philosophical about a fictional piece of candy, with no one really having objective value, you can't successfully argue Gummigoo is any less valuable than a person. However, Pomni reminds him that he has people he cares about, and people who care about him. That is subjective value, and it's the only value any one life can be defined. And regardless of how others may value you, only you can decide what things are worth to you. Or simply put, you shape your own reality. Dwelling on anything else is pointless and will only make you miserable. You know what else would make you miserable? If you were Pomni and Kane did this to you.
Hey, what?
Wait, what?
Now, you got to realise, while Ragatha's been nice to Pomni, it's Gummigoo she's made the first real connection with. While everyone else was human, he's the first person she first saw humanity in, clearly sharing a connection over his plight. For the first time entering the circus, Pomni felt like she wasn't alone, and I think it's cheering Gummigoo up where she realises that nobody is truly pointless, and that includes herself. As you may or may not know, Goose has said herself that the whole point of the show is to demonstrate that there's meaning in stagnant life. I mean, what life is more stagnant than that of an NPC, whose role in life is predetermined, and that knows nothing of the real world? Having empathized with Gummigoo, and assigning value to him herself, Pomni has learned that even her stagnant life can have meaning. Being an accountant for a supermarket chain doesn't make her life any less valuable than someone who does more exciting things, nor does it mean her life can't be fulfilling, though in episode 9, we'd find out how stagnant her life can really become. Before we get to that though, we need to talk about what happened at Spudsy's, because to everyone's surprise, Gummigoo returns, completely unharmed, gummier and gooier than ever, or whatever that means. Pomni obviously can't believe her eyes, and at first, she's desperate for him to remember what happened between them that day, but after stalking him for a while, she accepts he doesn't remember and lets him go. It's very bittersweet, because while he may or may not remember, Pomni realizes it doesn't really matter. He may have forgotten, but she never will. That connection she made will always mean something to her, and ultimately she realizes that his life is going to be a lot easier to lead if he doesn't know there's a wider world out there. And before we move on to his next technical appearance, we have to talk about episode 6, and specifically Jax's mindset. Jax tells Pomni they've all turned into cartoony archetypes, and that everything is so divorced from reality that nothing really matters. And when Pomni clarifies they're still real people, Jax shoots that notion down. It's fairly obvious how this opposes the show's message, right? If nothing matters, nothing has meaning. They are synonymous. And wacky cartoon characters, at least the archetypal kind that Jax is talking about, don't get to have anything more to them that's beyond the surface, or generally have rich inner lives. But thanks to Gummigoo, at this point, we already know that's complete bullshit, because no matter how cartoony or NPC-like they get, they still feel emotions, and are able to form connections, and these are things that inherently give life meaning. Even Jax, who claims otherwise, believes this deep down, which is why when this theory is presented with the slightest bit of pushback from Kinga, Jax has a complete breakdown, because for him, things having meaning is a bad thing. You know, considering his actions before and during the show. And it's also episode 8 where we'd once again see Gummigoo, only a cruel, twisted version of him generated by Kane. So as I had talked about in the beginning of the video, Kane makes everyone's worst nightmares a reality, with a somewhat abstract twist, but it's easy enough to guess where they're stemming from. Ragatha's being her fear of her mum, Jax's being his fear of vulnerability, especially in regards to Quothmo, Ribbit and Pomni. And then we have Pomni herself, whose is... So what, is she just afraid of her friends turning into scary monsters? Well, no, obviously not. And to understand this, we simply need to take a look at what I talked about Gummigoo representing. Humanity, self-worth, and connection. What could be a worse fear for Pomni than someone emblematic of those ideas becoming a total inversion of them? Feral, unthinking, and purposeless. Gummigoo was the thing that finally grounded Pomni, and that's why later on in the same episode they met, she was able to see the humanity of everyone else in the circus, allowing her to form other extremely important connections. This is far from an embarrassing fear. In fact, thematically, it's absolutely perfect. And in the final episode, the show's philosophy is put to the ultimate test. It's almost immediately revealed that everyone in the circus is a mere brain scan, not a person wearing a headset, but simply just an in-the-moment copy of someone's consciousness, meaning the real them is still out there somewhere. Of course, everyone freaks out over having to abandon the idea of leaving, and what's highlighted in particular is the fact they're no longer able to fulfill any of the dreams they had as humans, which Jax naturally rubs in their faces, despite the fact he's the most devastated of the gang, leading to his inevitable abstraction. Now, a lot of people think he was proved right since everyone is fake, but quite frankly, that ignores everything the show had been trying to say all along. Sure, they may not be real people, but
it always was real. Everything we felt, everything we've done, everything we are. It'll never leave us.
there's absolutely no reason why being brain scanned should invalidate their lived experiences. To real humans, they may be nothing, but to reiterate, objective value of a life is simply not possible. If their lives matter to them, subjectively, they have meaning definitionally. Even if they're stagnant, stuck in the circus and living as brain scans, no more alive than NPCs like Gummigoo. And that's why Pomni's resolution at the end, to accept that she and Abby are different people, is so important. Thanks to making connections conversations with everyone, including Jax, and definitely including Gummigoo, whom she arguably learned the most from, she finally realized that her life means something, even as Pomni. Long story short, leave my marketable husband alone. Asshole. I'm just kidding, love you guys, bye!